Chintu felt he had everything. Though there was no real playground, the entire town was a playground for him and his friends. They played cricket with a bat made from a wooden plank. If not a wooden plank, then anything that could stop the ball turned into the cricket bat for that moment. Footwear was a luxury, so he used to play with naked feet for the whole day because slippers were only meant for school. The concept of buying toys was unheard of. A broken radio, old vessels, bicycle tires, pebbles, street dogs, cats, anything and everything around him became a toy for him. As a kid, he never felt that he's compromising anywhere because that's how the entire neighborhood was living their life. But as he was growing from a kid to a boy, he began realizing a few things along the way. Chintu used to run for miles wearing nothing in his feet. The mud under his feet was so soft that he never felt that he's running without slippers. Only when he stopped over a stone hidden beneath the soft mud, he realized that he's running without anything on his feet. Sometimes he used to run blissfully for miles together with just a tire of a bicycle. Until one day, he saw one of his friends on a new BSA SLR bicycle. He only had imagined the taste of ice cream looking at those ads on their black and white TV set. One day when he asked for it, he got an answer from his father that it was not good for his teeth. The answer convinced him that the ice cream was not made for him. Every year, one pair of shirt and a trouser would be stitched with the help of a local tailor, specially to be worn during festivals, until he saw his friend wearing a t-shirt with a He-Man printed on it. He wore a broken Bata slipper with a safety pin attached at the bottom binding the strap together, until one day at the PT session, he saw one of his school friends wearing a white canvas shoes. Every year, he had school books either passed from his cousin or the neighborhood kids, but his classmates always bought new books for the new school session. When his school shorts became a bit too tight or short, his mom used to open the backside of the trouser and remove the folds so that it became looser and longer to be worn for another year. But he used to find some of his classmates come in brand new uniforms. As he was growing from a kid to a boy, he started realizing many things, but Chintu could never ask for anything from his parents because he knew that his parents didn't have the means to provide him what he wanted. When Chintu turned 7, his grandfather gifted him a flute and also taught him how to play it. When his grandpa passed away, Chintu kept on practicing the flute all alone sitting by the lakeside. This was his favorite pastime. Most of the people were not even aware that Chintu could play the flute so well. It was 10th of August 1993 when the principal of the school wanted to select 10 kids to play the flute for the Independence Day celebration. This got Chintu very excited. This was his golden opportunity to pay a tribute to his grandfather. Chintu decided to invite his parents and surprise them through his performance on the school stage. Excited, Chintu ran to the principal's room and told him that he wanted to participate. The principal replied, "Okay, Chintu, come tomorrow for rehearsal and bring 22 rupees with you to buy a steel flute so that everyone's flute would look the same." Chintu had an old wooden flute for many years. For him, a wooden flute or a steel one was all the same. He never knew the difference until this day. But asking for 22 rupees from his father to buy a new flute was totally out of question. And at that very moment, Chintu knew that he cannot participate for the 15th August celebration. Chintu never bothered to even ask for 22 rupees from his father because he knew that spending 22 rupees on a flute was a luxury that wasn't made for him. He realized that he needed to be realistic always and stay within his limits. He could enjoy life to fullest while staying within his limits. That's all he knew. But that day something special happened and a dream was born. A dream to live a better life. A dream that Chintu wasn't really even aware of until now. But Chintu realized that if 22 rupees can kill his dream, then the same 22 rupees could also help him achieve it. That steel flute made him think over and over again. He ran to his father, hugged him and told him, "Papa, मुझे लाइफ में बड़ा बनना है." His father replied, "बेटा, मुझे वो दिन देखना है." From that day, Chintu was not the same Chintu anymore. He started observing more whenever he went around his town. While walking, he used to observe the slippers he was wearing and what the other kids were wearing. He used to observe the bat that he was playing with and the rest of the kids were playing with, a shirt he was wearing and other kids were wearing. This is where he realized the difference between a wooden flute and a steel flute. As time passed, Chintu got a new hobby of collecting posters of sports bike and a sports car from old magazines and pasting them on his wall. One day, while flipping a magazine, Chintu also found images of a steel flute and he pasted that on his wall. While staring at those posters, he grew into an adult. Slowly, the posters started fading away. The colors became duller and the images started fading. As the years passed by, those posters got buried under the exam schedules, important notes, and catalogues of various MBA universities. The posters of a red Ferrari and a steel flute kept peeping between many catalogues that lay scattered. By now, many of his old friends started leaving the small town for post-graduation in various parts of the country. Chintu realized that in a small town, he will never be able to achieve what he wanted to achieve. A small town could never fulfill his dreams. Just like many of his friends, Chintu appeared for MBA entrance exam. Finally, he got through, but he had no money to pay. So he got the first loan of his life, an education loan. Chintu left his small town to pursue an MBA. He saw a race to become successful and climb up the corporate ladder. All he heard was name of big MNCs and the flattering designations like CEO, CFO, VP, etc. This is where he learned that to build wealth, you need to build a career. And he started believing that a degree of MBA will change his life. Now time came for the campus placement, for his job interviews. He borrowed a jacket, shoes and a tie. When he wore those clothes for the first time in his life, he felt that his life is finally changing. That tie looked so good on him. He took picture and sent it to his parents. He believed that this tie had the power to change his life forever. Chintu got a job. He passed through the interview of a big MNC in Mumbai and was offered a salary of whopping 22,000 rupees. The first thing that Chintu did was to call up his parents. He told his father, "वो दिन अभी दूर नहीं है जिस दिन मैं बड़ा आदमी बनूंगा." All his relatives started calling him one by one to congratulate him. Chintu was on cloud 9. Life couldn't be better. Chintu remembered his childhood where he couldn't afford the steel flute. He thanked that day because it had pushed him to do something about his life. He remembered the posters of the sports car he used to stick on a wall of his room and the promise he made to his father. He truly felt that the degree of MBA will bring him all the happiness in the world. Finally, Chintu reached Mumbai. He came to this big city with big dreams. He saw people running and rushing everywhere. There was a queue for everything. His office was in Andheri, but his salary only allowed to rent a house in Mira Road, and that was a bit too far. He started traveling by the Mumbai local train. He realizes that it was not easy to manage life in Mumbai. The job started. After the first salary of 22,000 rupees, Chintu withdrew the full salary of 22,000 rupees just to hold and feel those notes. For the first time, he was holding such a big amount in his hand. He remembered the day he couldn't afford a flute of 22 rupees, and today he had 22,000 rupees in his hand. He felt that he had arrived in life. From this day onwards, he felt that he had made it. He had ticked his dream to become big in life, and he got into comfort zone. The poverty of aspiration is what keeps people poor. It was his first weekend in Mumbai after holding the salary in his hand. For the first time, he entered an AC restaurant and bought a grocery from a supermarket. Finally, Chintu stepped into the mall and saw few brand names which he had always heard from MBA friends. He picked up 2 new shirts, ties, and trousers. He bought himself new shoes. Now Chintu could afford an auto rickshaw to roam around the city and to go to the office. When he came back home after shopping, he sat down on the sofa and cried a lot. The leather shoes were much better than Bata slippers. Auto rickshaw was definitely better than a bicycle. Having a ceiling fan in the room was better than having no fan. Shopping with trolley in the supermarket was better than Lalaji ki dukaan. Chintu called his parents and told them, "Life is much better in Mumbai. Even atta is branded here. We don't have to go to Atta Chakki." A few years later, Chintu got married. Looking at Chintu getting more responsible, his parents got him married to a girl from their native place. Newly married life in Mumbai was blissful. The initial few days were all about going to movies, eating in restaurants, etc. But when the 15th day of the month came, Chintu realized that his pocket was empty and the salary was over in the blink of an eye. This is where he decided to spend wisely. Chintu never realized that he is short of money because 22,000 rupees salary had given him a life that was much better than the small town he came from. So he never felt that he was earning less. He felt it was useless to spend. To go out during weekends, they preferred a train because it was relatively empty on weekends. Instead of spending money on the auto rickshaw, eating peanuts and walking till the train station was considered fun. Getting down at Lower Parel, going to the biggest mall, only to take pictures next to the branded shops, then uploading them on FB and getting maximum friends to like them was a different level of high. His friends used to comment, "Chintu, ab to bada aadmi ho gaya yaar." And while reading those comments, Chintu felt he has finally reached where he wanted to in life. He used to wait for brands to go on sale. Then only he would enter inside the shop with his wife. He started making fun of those people who entered in the shop when there was no sale, making it look like a complete waste of money. Whenever his wife would show him a bike, he would say, "It's not safe to drive in Mumbai." When his wife would show him a car, he would say, "Why waste so much petrol? Only for 2 of us?" A different level of arrogance was slowly creeping within him. He called himself street smart than poor. He started giving advice to people on how it was plain stupid to spend money. He said, "Even if I had that money, I will not spend it on luxury," he declared. "Apne itne bade sapne thodi na hai," was his usual answer. A different level of poverty was growing in his head, which he never realized. Instead of growing his income beyond 22,000 rupees, Chintu was more focused on how to save and where to cut corners. After a few years, after living for a couple of years in Mumbai, Chintu managed to get a bank loan and bought his own house. Soon he was blessed with a very bright son. When he turned 6, Chintu had taught him how to play a flute. Chintu gave him the same wooden flute which he played as a kid. And when he gave the flute to his son, he told him, "This wooden flute pushed me to come out of the small town and achieve all my dreams." Chintu never realized that he has still not made it in life. One day, Chintu dropped his son to school, and as he was late for work, he reached the railway station. He saw the train approaching the platform from the opposite side. Chintu knew that if he misses this train, then his boss will see him walking late to work, and that might become his excuse for not giving him an increment. All these thoughts were playing in Chintu's mind. As the train entered into the platform, he crossed over the railway tracks to get inside through a shortcut. But by then, the train was extremely close to him. And after that, all he could feel was that he was thrown and he blacked out. Chintu didn't feel anything and he felt as if he's getting uplifted. Slowly he realized he's walking, but he couldn't feel his body anymore. He couldn't see anyone around him. All he could feel was a foggy atmosphere, with no one to hear him. He screamed again for help. He screamed and called his wife, his son, his father, his mother, but there was nobody to hear him. And finally, as the fog cleared, he found himself walking on a lonely path towards a ferry. Yes, it was a ferry for real. He ran towards the ferry to ask what was happening to him. But ferry was quiet. Chintu saw tears in her eyes. He realized that something had gone wrong. But still, like an angel, she became Chintu's guiding star in that moment of darkness. She guided him to his house. Immediately he ran into the lane, but strangely he couldn't feel his feet. The ferry was behind him all the time, flying and following him. He started running towards his house and reached the doorstep. He was shocked to see what has happened. His wife and kid and his parents were howling and crying out loud in front of his photo. His relatives, neighbors were all around crying with him. When he tried to touch his son and his father, they couldn't feel anything. That's when Chintu realized that he was dead. He was no more. He had left the world already. He looked at that ferry and pleaded to her, "Can you help me meet my family again?" The ferry went silent. His dad and mom couldn't handle the trauma. All of a sudden, his father suffered a heart attack. Chintu ran to save his father, but he couldn't hold his father. People rushed and took him to the nearest hospital. Chintu ran to hospital. He saw the doctors were not willing to admit his father because his father didn't have an insurance and enough money to pay. People rushed towards the government hospital, but on the way, his father passed away. Chintu ran to his father and screamed out loud. He tried to hold his father, but he couldn't feel anything. Seeing Chintu crying, the fairy finally spoke. "Chintu, if you're born poor, it's okay. But if you die poor, then..." Chintu and the fairy went back home together. His wife was holding her head and crying. The next day, the doorbell rang. Few officers from the bank had come to collect the house installment. Chintu's wife looked into the bank account and she had hardly some money left. Chintu's salary of that month had not been credited. The bank officers gave her only 1 week to empty the apartment. Chintu saw this happening in front of him. Chintu felt helpless and tears rolled down his eyes. His belief in his job and monthly salary had costed him his life and his family's life too. He saw overnight how his wife had to relocate to the nearest chawl. She rented one room with a common toilet and continued her life in Mumbai just to keep her son's education going. Next day, she visited the bank and claimed Chintu's bank account and found there's hardly some money left in his bank. That money was not even enough to pay her son's education in a city like Mumbai. Then his wife decided to take up a job. But with her monthly salary of 5,000, she could pay only the rent of the house and the monthly grocery. She couldn't afford to pay the school fees. Eventually, Chintu's son was removed from the school for not paying his fees on time. That was the darkest day for Chintu. He remembered his wife's word, Chintu, our bank balance is hand to mouth. We have still not earned enough money for ourselves. Chintu realized for the first time why earning money was so important, but it was too late. Chintu opened a wooden shelf in his house, touched the wooden flute, and told the fairy, "I wish I wouldn't have stopped dreaming." Now Chintu's wife and her son had to move back to the same house where Chintu was born and spend his entire childhood. His wife got her son admitted in the same school where Chintu had studied. Chintu saw his son going back to the same school and living the same life which he had lived years ago. He saw his son running around the same lake, the same lanes, and the same small town. He realized that his job had not taken him too far. It has in fact brought him back to square one. Chintu's son used to play the flute in his spare time. Sitting by the lake in the memory of his father, Chintu sat beside him and watched him play while tears rolled down his eyes. But he was completely helpless. While Chintu was sitting by the lake, the fairy appeared. She told Chintu, "Sometimes people spend years and travel thousands of miles thinking they are working very hard. And they feel they have done enough for their families. But they are actually running only in circles and often realizes it when it is too late." One day, Chintu's son was playing the flute sitting on the steps of the school premises. His teacher, who was passing by, noticed him. He told him, "You play the flute so well. Why don't you participate in the 15th August celebration?" Chintu's son was very excited to hear this. But then the teacher said, "The flute you have is very old. Get a new steel flute or bring 200 rupees. I'll buy you a new one." After listening to his teacher, Chintu's son realized that 200 rupees was a big amount for his mother. He was not willing to burden his mother in a situation where she is helpless. All the while, Chintu was watching this whole incident. Chintu's son ran home, hugged his mother and cried a lot. He told his mother, "Mummy, मुझे life में बड़ा बनना है." Even his mother told him only one thing, "बेटा, मुझे वो दिन देखना है." Life had taken full circle. Chintu realized that he was only one step away from going back the same point where he had started his journey. Chintu screamed out loud, but there was no one to hear him except a fairy. The fairy went to Chintu and told him, "Chintu, you have realized that there is a big difference between owning a wooden flute and a steel flute. There is a difference between living in a house in Mumbai and owning a good house in Mumbai. There is a difference between driving a car and driving a luxury car. The difference is either you have control over life or let life and situation control you." Saying this, the fairy held Chintu's hand and placed a steel flute and told Chintu, "It's time to wake up." As soon as Chintu touched the steel flute, all of a sudden he could now feel his body. He could hear noise around him. From the noise, he heard someone calling him, "Papa, Papa, wake up. Papa, Papa, utho na." Chintu could recognize that it was his son's voice. He opened his eyes and found himself in a hospital. He realized that he was actually alive. He had fainted with the shock of a train coming close to him. Chintu got his life back, but he had woken up for life.